So today we're going to be talking about how to avoid cliches and tropes. And funny story, cliches and tropes are actually different things, but they are used interchangeably, but technically they are slightly different. So it's no different than, unfortunately, a lot of words in the English language, where things get interchangeably used even though they should not be interchangeably used. So, first, we're going to define which is what, and hopefully I'm doing this right. Okay, so a cliche is generally something that is sentence-based. So cliche is often something sentence-based or minute. Or small. So these are things like, example, furrowed their brow. This is a very common phrase that you guys have probably all heard. However, it is technically a cliche because it has been used for years and years and years. There's nothing wrong with using it. Absolutely nothing wrong with using cliches. Sometimes we can't think of anything else, and as a writer, we just need to keep moving forward and use the cliche and move on. However, if you can avoid cliches, this gives your writing a much fresher feel. So if we were to make it not a cliche, we could say scrunched their brow, or could say mashed their brow together. These are all things that aren't commonly used. Another common cliche is their eyes welled with tears. We've all probably heard this one. But there are obviously other ways you can do it. Make it a little more your own. You can say their eyes sparkled with tears, their eyes dripped with tears. You can just take the original and put your own spin on it. And that's the same thing with tropes. The trick with tropes and cliches is putting your own spin on it and making sure that you can adjust the camera here. There we go. And making sure that you can make it your own, make it unique. There's nothing wrong with doing something very cliche or tropey. Absolutely nothing wrong. And if it's all you can think of at the moment, that's okay. This is what editors are for in post. However, that doesn't mean that you can't try to prevent it up front. Now, in the other hand, tropes. Tropes are defined as, I'm going to try to give a paraphrase definition, so if you Google it, it will probably not say this, but this is going to be my definition based on what I know of tropes. Tropes are common themes or elements that have been overdone. So, for example, common tropes may or may not include, sorry, didn't realize it was off the screen. Common tropes can include things like the damsel in distress, or, let's see, I don't want to do knight in shining armor because that, even though that is a trope, I'm trying to give variety here. Another trope is, the more modern version of damsel in distress, where the superhero's girlfriend is always getting kidnapped. Okay, so with this, and again, nothing's wrong with these. Absolutely nothing's wrong with these. It's about putting your own spin on it and making it unique. Where it gets overdone is if you see like 1,000 people doing the same thing. So for example, Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, where it's all of these damsels in distress who are constantly being saved by the knight in shining armor. I don't have a problem with that. Where the problem comes in, one second. Where the problem comes in with tropes and cliches is the fact that they are so overused that when people read them, they want to stop reading because of the fact that they feel like, oh, I've seen this before, I'm bored. Now, absolutely, as I said before, there's nothing wrong with tropes and cliches. If you make them your own. And you gotta make sure you make them your own. You gotta make them unique. Now let's talk about some common pitfalls where tropes and cliches can occur. So, common pitfalls where tropes and cliches can occur is, first I'm going to go with tropes because tropes are a lot harder to avoid than cliches. Cliches, even though they're harder to avoid on a sentence level, you can fix those in post with editing a lot easier than you can tropes. You can fix tropes in editing, but it's going to be a lot more work. It's going to take a lot more time, so it's good to realize the pitfalls up front. So, the first trope that I'm going to talk about is living the dream, aka self-insert characters. Now, as I said before, there's nothing wrong with any of these things. The thing that occurs that's wrong is when you have certain things that just don't work as well. So for example, with self-insert characters, the problem tends to be that they follow the plot too easily. They have no reason to follow the plot, but they do just because they would, right? They would, except they wouldn't. You have this wonderful, rich girl living the life that she has always wanted in a mansion with servants and butlers, and yet, for some bizarre reason, she decides, I'm going to go and fight this dragon. No. No, not really. She has no reason to fight the dragon, right? She just is because the plot told her to, right? And this is where self-insert characters are a problem, because you as a character are like, oh, right, if I was in this rich mansion, that would be like the best life ever, right? Which is totally, absolutely true. But then you also think, hey, you know what would be also the best life ever? If I was a dragon slayer. But then the problem is you forget that Dream 1 and Dream 2 don't really make sense together. And so you gotta make sure the dreams make sense together. If she's this wealthy heiress who's waving and having tea parties all the time and, you know, having this beautiful life, what is gonna make her go slay a dragon? Is it because the dragon stole her father, who's sickly and ill? Is it because of the fact that the dragon, you know, I don't know.
The dragon gave her a dirty stare.
The dragon gave her a dirty stare, and she's like, you know what? I am the sassiest girl ever. That dragon has to go. You know, like that can even be a good reason. Yeah, there you go. Like you gotta come up with a unique reason that one can flow into the other, or like she has a wonderful sister, and she finds out that she didn't know that her sister has been living with this dragon in order to repay a debt, and she's like, I'm gonna go avenge my sister and set her free. You know. That is a great plot. The only problem is that you need to explain that. You can't just, I mean, you can, but then you need to fix it later. You can't just do what's called retconning. Now, we mentioned this last time. I'm going to give a more basic definition. Retconning is when you do something, like she's a wealthy heiress and she goes to kill a dragon for no reason. And then later you're like, oh, shoot, I didn't give her a reason. And you're like, oh, by the way, her sister was here this whole time. So you're basically going back and saying, whoops, I made a mistake, I need to fix that, I need to smooth this over. So it's smoothing it over in post. Typically an editor will just smooth it over the whole way through, but as a writer, sometimes you need to smooth things over in post because you totally forgot and you're like, ah, shoot, I'm already 200 pages in and I can't go back and start editing now, you know, or that'll slow you down. So you just retcon and then you can fix it later. This also happens with series. A lot of authors will be like, oh my gosh, I had this absolutely brilliant idea the other day, but it totally conflicts with this other thing I did in book 1, and you've already published it. Whoops. And you're like, I did not plan this out, which is okay. Lots of pantsers out there, or gardeners rather than architects, whichever term you prefer. The architects and planners, or plotters and pantsers and gardeners. And with that, there are a lot of people like that. Brandon Sanderson, actually, I'm pretty sure, is a gardener/pantser. He doesn't really plot out beforehand. If he does, it's kind of just like, oh, by the way, this thing happens, and over here, it's not like point A, point B, you know? It's not a straight line. He's just kind of like, oh yeah, by the way, this happens. He often talks about adding foreshadowing in later because of that. And this is the same thing I'm going to recommend here. If you're doing retconning, absolutely feel free to add it in later, but then find a way to weave it into the story so it makes sense. Don't just throw it in there and then say, okay, the readers will be fine with it, because some readers aren't fine with it. In fact, most readers aren't fine with it. They prefer when retconning is pretty seamlessly done. If you're going to retcon, make sure you do it in a very smooth way, that it flows together well. All right, so moving on from self-insert characters. The next big trope that is related to self-insert characters, because this often happens with self-insert characters, but not always, hence why I have them as two different categories, because this can happen with regular characters or self-inserts, but it's more common with self-insert, is the Mary Sue. Oh boy, my marker's dying. Mary Sue and Marty Stu. And we mentioned this a little bit last time, but I wanted to go more in depth on it. And I know we said we were going to do world building this week, but I realized that's actually a really massive lesson, so I'm doing more planning on that so we can do that later. I just want to make sure you would really thorough job with this, with the world building one. Anyway, with our characters, Mary Sue or Marty Stu. I'll be honest, this term was coined a long time ago. It's not mine. So if you want to check out the origins of Mary Sue / Marty Stu, absolutely please do. Marty Stu came first because there were more commonly male characters than female characters, but inevitably the same problem started happening with female characters as time went on. And as a result, Mary Sue was invented as well. So with these types of characters, they are incredibly overpowered, and having an overpowered character is fine. But the problem is you have to do it in a unique way or balance it out.
His character.
That's okay. I mean, hey, Superman's a character and he is way too overpowered, and yet some people love Superman, right? So there's nothing wrong with having an overpowered character or a Marty Stu or Mary Sue. Absolutely, Superman is a Marty Stu. 110%. However, the reason that works was because there were far less Marty Stews back then. So as a result, if you're going to do it in modern day, you have to be a little bit more careful. Yeah, you have to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more creative. You have to make it a little bit more your own instead of just being like, nothing can stop them because they are Superman. And it's like, okay. No, I'm bored, excuse me, right? I'm like, okay.
Going back on the show.
Right, and then on top of that, they decided to throw in the whole, oh, by the way, my death is kryptonite, that thing from a planet that is extinct. It's like, and somehow everyone seems to happen to have kryptonite. So many questions. Again, this is very much a superhero trope, so you can do it if you'd like, but at the same time, just know that a few readers might be annoyed with you and get a little bored. And that is perfectly okay. If you want to go that route, then let's go that route. But I'm just recommending, maybe with your Mary Sues and Marty Stews, try to balance them out a little bit more. And
Heroes with flaws are a yes.
Heroes with flaws are absolutely a yes. We relate to them more, right? The main problem with Mary Sue and Marty Stu is we're like, Mary Sue and Marty Stu don't exist. They're perfect, flawless people that are just held up on this pedestal, and instead of feeling like, yes, that hero with flaws is relatable, that hero with flaws could be me, I can do this. You're like, oh, they can only do that because they're them. And you don't feel as good.
It's like, oh, yay, they saved 33 million people with a snap of their fingers.
Exactly, they just poof, snap their fingers.
That's
it's like,
for you to make them real.
Exactly, that doesn't even feel real. You're just like, oh, that's cool, I guess. And especially because superpowers have to make sense, right?
Yeah, like if it's if you like died and then got reincarnated.
Yeah.
But you have like superpowers.
Yeah, if you died and got reincarnated and you have superpowers, but now you also have like all this knowledge from your previous life. There you go. See, like lots of things can be made unique like that.
Doing that with one of my books, and it only happens when they're killed by their soul bone. Yeah. Killed by the person who's like magically tied to them.
Very nice.
And with these two characters, that's the only way they've ever died.
See,
and it happens a lot.
So as a result, things like that can work, or if it's like genetically in the family or something like that. But another problem with Superman is the fact that a lot of his powers don't make logical sense. And they tried to like retcon that a little bit in some of the new superhero series that they've done with Superman and Supergirl. But part of the problem is that they'll mention, hey, kryptonite is part of the reason that they can't do this or they can't do that. But then they'll also say, oh yeah, it's because of the red sun as well. And so they explain that the red sun makes it so their skin is soft and pliable, but this yellow sun makes it so they're bulletproof. And the gravity on this planet is different, which is why they can fly. And so they tried to flesh it out a little bit more and make a little bit more sense. It's still a little weird, but at least makes a little bit more sense than just kryptonite. You know?
Kryptonite.
Well, see, this person was special.
Exactly. They were just special. They're an alien, therefore we can do whatever we want. Laser eyes. It's like, okay, nope.
That could work with a cyborg though. Just like have
Exactly.
little
If he was
laser
a
thingies in
cyborg,
their
that would be
eyes,
super awesome.
Yeah, like
Sick.
But
Like,
see, this is why I talk about the tropes. Because of the fact that even though this is a trope, you can do it in a unique way that makes it palatable and makes it so your readers actually love it. Make sure to give your heroes flaws, and make sure that if you give them powers, their powers have a weakness that makes sense and would realistically come up often. For example, with Superman, the idea that kryptonite exists magically everywhere on this planet, Earth, you know, way, way far away from the other planet that exploded, not very realistic. The idea that they're going to run into any kryptonite is almost impossible. However, that was his flaw. But the best way to fix a Marty Stu or a Mary Sue is to make sure that their powers either are really hard to earn, like we talked about last time with adding meat to your story. Make sure that their powers are hard to earn, or if they're not that hard to earn, like you said, you explain how they got it and why it's not hard to earn, and give them a different flaw. And the flaw has to be something that will actually realistically come up. So you can't have it be like their flaws that they're super afraid of spiders.
No.
And it's like, okay, how likely is it that they are going to be fighting the villain? The villain's just going to be like, haha, I have a spider.
Unless the villain is a spider.
Unless the villain is a spider, but even then, like...
Or unless for some reason villain has a thingy where like, ha, I'm the greatest friend. So he
Your
like put
greatest
that in
friend.
jar of spiders because he's weird like that.
Because he's weird. I am prepared. I have spider vest. And you're like, what?
Kids like, behold.
But if her or his fear is more realistic or there in today's society, I absolutely understand. Any gender is plausible. With them, you need to make sure that they have a realistic fault. So, for example, with Harry Potter, and I know this is like controversial and all because like some of the Harry Potter stuff was really good, some of the Harry Potter stuff wasn't so good, but that's the same thing with all authors. All authors have struggles sometimes. With that, they talk a lot about how Harry Potter, you know, it's because of the love of his mother, and then of course once his blood is mixed with Voldemort's, spoiler alert, then it's like, oh poof, now that doesn't work anymore. You know, now I can touch you, now I can cause you harm, you know. And you got to make sure that things like that can be undone. You got to make sure that if there is some reason that they are superpowered or immune, that it can be undone. You can't have it be a permanent immunity. Even if they are some race like an elf or something. Even elves have ways they can die, right? They're not completely immortal.
Yeah.
They can die. Exactly. They can die of old age. They can die of a bullet to the chest. Well, arrow, but you know, theoretically, if elves lived in nowadays, bullet, they could theoretically still die. You need to make sure that they have these weaknesses to their strengths in order to make them more human, even if they're an alien or an elf. Alien in the case of Superman. Any other questions about Marty, Stu, or Mary Sue before I move on?
Wait, no,
Or self-insert characters.
I had a really good question, but
That's okay.
Gone.
We can always do questions at the end as well, so if you rethink of it, write it down. All right. The next one is what I like to call flawless chemistry.
Oh,
This is the typical thing that, oh no, my marker's dying. Oh no, we might not be able to do this anymore. The marker's dead. The marker has perished. R.I.P. marker. Okay. Flawless chemistry. Now, the problem with flawless chemistry is no romance is ever perfect, and it never happens that quick, that fast. And another issue that comes in with flawless chemistry is don't claim it's a slow burn romance if it takes less than a year. You cannot call it a slow burn if it takes less than a year. A slow burn romance has to be at least a year. And you can't do all these fancy time skips where you're like, oh yeah, by the way, during this time skip, they totally had like all this bonding. Now the reader's like, but I missed all the cute, fluffy bonding. The reader wants that. The reader doesn't want you to just be like, oh yeah, and they fell in love. Or, oh yeah, and they trust each other for no reason, despite the fact that they didn't trust each other at the beginning. Oh yeah, and by the way,
did they kill someone together?
Exactly. Did they kill someone together? Did they fight a villain together? There has to be a reason they trust each other, and it can't just be this one I've seen a lot. The classic superhero training scene where they're getting all up close and personal, and so they're like, "Ooh, you're attractive," or whatever. And I'm like, okay, there has to be more than just, "Ooh, you're attractive," and I punched you in the face, and you have a nice jawline when I punched you in the face. Like,
excuse me?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
only okay with that in Mulan. Even then.
Even then! It's
Like, she saved the dude's life.
Exactly. She saved the dude's life, and beyond that, the way that they were doing things together, they kept sitting down to it next to each other, and him being, I'm assuming you're talking about the live action one.
Oh no,
The cartoon one.
Yeah.
Because the live action one actually does it a lot better than the cartoon one, because they realized that.
Oh yeah.
And so with that, the live action one, they had them sitting down together and actually having those conversations where she's like, well, I think women should be smart and like strong and stuff. And he's like, well, how do you even talk to a woman? Like, it's so hard. And he's sitting here talking to a woman dressed as a man, having no idea. And that kind of helped them bond a little more, where he's being vulnerable to her because he assumes that she's a man. And as a result, they create this trust, they create this bond. And throughout that time, too, there are lots of times where she doesn't trust him because of the fact that she realizes, if he realizes I'm a girl, I could die. And she doesn't trust him right away. There are times where the trust is a fine line. It's not, trust should be earned in any good novel, unless they are a super naive character and that is your whole point. If the whole point is they are super naive and they're like, of course, big bad wolf, I will walk into the woods with you. If that's your point, then I guess okay. But generally, trust should be earned. Trust should be something where they're like, I don't know about you. But later, after conversations and talking and working together, it works. And so with flawless chemistry, you just have to make sure that they don't fall in love perfectly. There has to be pitfalls, and they have to be realistic pitfalls, and they have to be meaningful pitfalls. You can't just have it be like, oh, we had one tiny little fight over what color the walls should be, and now I'm not sure if I love you anymore.
Wait, what?
It's like,
no.
Okay, if that's all it took, you should not be dating. You should not even be considering it.
Sorry, if that's your fight, and if that's the outcome.
Yep, if that's the end.
What the heck?
Oh, exactly.
B, how did you last that long?
How did you last that long? Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Or then
never talk.
Exactly. You should never talk again. You should not date that person. This is a problem. Then there's the other problem with flawless chemistry in the regard that they make the fights about a realistic thing, but then they have it go on too long. So for instance, instead of having it be flawless chemistry, they're like, oh shoot, my chemistry's too flawless. I have to have a flaw. And you do the flaw wrong.
It's like, you didn't like my shoes.
or things like, oh no, well, I'm really traumatized because this other best friend of mine died, and so as a result, I'm scared of losing you. Absolutely, that is a valid reason to be like, I'm breaking up with you because I don't want you to die. That's valid.
Yeah, like Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, like in Once Upon a Time, or Michael Bay, spoiler, or things like that. in general, they have things like that where they're like, I don't want you to die, and because I know that being related to me means you're gonna die, I'm breaking up with you. That makes sense. But here's the thing. The reason it makes sense is because it does give a flaw to the flawless chemistry. Absolutely. And if you have flawless chemistry, it's important to have these moments. But you have to make sure that they don't go on too long to an unrealistic point. So, for example, with Once Upon a Time, that absolutely made sense. And they had it so the tension was throughout, and the other guy kept trying to get back together, right? He kept trying to be like, hey, this should be working. Why isn't it working? And that makes more sense because she wasn't letting him in, right? However, there can go wrong too, where like in Michael Vey, they had such flawless chemistry, but then he was like, it's too flawless, I have to have a flaw. Absolutely great, I agree. You should have a flaw. It should not be flawless chemistry. Every love interest has to be hard fought and hard won. Even in today's society, sometimes there are small things or big things that will get in the way of your love life. Sorry, spoiler alert. Your love life might be rough. That's normal. You might have to
life, everyone. If you can't handle a rough love life, then you're not cut out for life.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
You might have to wait for them for a long time because they have to go on a trip and you have to do the long distance thing. Or you might have a long distance person in the first place. I know people who have met people and then they're like, hey, I have to go finish school in Idaho. Super far away, you know? And that is hard. Or there are things like, hey, your family and my family don't exactly like, you know, we have different traditions, you know, kind of like interracial families tend to have that problem where they have different traditions. And so it's like, well, we work together well, but our families might not work together well, you know? And that can be hard too. And so there's a lot of things that make it hard. But the problem that occurred, spoiler alert, just like skip the next 30 seconds if you don't want spoilers. Michael Vey, where they went wrong was the fact that he was like, hey, I don't want you to die, so I'm breaking up with you. And then it went on too long. He kept being like, oh man, I miss her, but we're in the same camp, but we can't really talk, but I can't really talk to her because I broke up with her, and I'm just gonna go like chop this tree and be all moody. And yeah, they were like, we need firewood, and he's like, great, I'll go chop firewood moodily. And I'm like, nice, okay, all right. And I understand that. If I was like, hey, this is the love of my life, and I have to break up with them in order to protect them, that would suck. But the problem is that it just kept going in such a way that like he just accepted it, but was really like hurting on the inside, and she just accepted it, but was really hurting on the inside. They didn't try to fight for each other. They just both went off and sulked.
It was like, well, we're breaking
That was
up,
the problem.
so
Exactly. Well, we're breaking up, so I'm sad. And it's like, okay.
That's nice. You're sad. Get over it. Fight for the dude.
Exactly. If you love them, fight for them. And then beyond that, if you're going to fight for them, don't have it go on so long where you just keep throwing problems in the way. Now, Michael Bay didn't do that. They just had it go on way too long where they just accepted it. But also, alternately, you can't just have them constantly have things thrown in the way, otherwise the reader's going to start to get annoyed with you. Where you're like, oh, they're about to kiss, and then troll. Oh, they're about to kiss, dragon. Oh, they're about to kiss, another troll. And it's like, okay, I swear, if you throw one more troll in my way, I am going to kill you, author. You're dead.
They're about to kiss, and then another dragon. It's not a troll.
It's not a troll, but hey, it's I give up.
Oh, another mythical?
Sorry, say that again?
The Loki one.
The Loki one? How so? Oh, you mean like with them? Oh man, with the Loki one, I actually thought it was well done because it was realistic. It made sense with what was happening. They were trying to put the universe back together, right? That was their first priority. So sometimes your love life will also take a back seat to other things, and that's okay if that's the case. Like, for example, a lot of fantasy novels have it where the war is getting in the way, right? So it's like, we super love each other, but I have to go off with my battalion, and you have to go off with yours, and we're not going to be seeing each other for a while.
Yeah, is that like,
If ever again.
If ever again, I might die. And so it's important with flawless chemistry not to give it flaws that don't make sense, but also to not have any flaws. Because no relationship is flawless. You don't just fall in love happily ever after, mwah, mwah,
No.
the end.
Don't
No.
hold on.
No,
What?
don't do a Cinderella either where it's like, oh no, all you have to do is find my shoe and then happily ever after.
No.
Too simple. Too simple.
Like the quest for the shoe, okay.
Yes.
I can respect that. But
They
if that's the reason you get married,
No.
I'm sorry. No.
Problems.
I'm sorry.
And then even that's part of the reason when I was a little girl, I loved Sleeping Beauty so much because it was actually a battle to get together, right?
Yeah.
He had to fight through thorns and dragons and poison and all these things. It was actually a battle to get to her.
Yeah.
Whereas with Cinderella, it was basically just, oh shoot, you left a shoe.
All right, let's go plot. Oh, shoe house. That's a shoe. Housekeeping is not going to be happy.
Exactly, like, I don't know what to do with this. All right, so you need to have more problems with your romance rather than just happily ever after. All right, now, however, on the flip side, a lot of you have probably heard of the enemies to lovers trope.
Okay, I'm familiar with this one.
Yep. And I'm going to call it, because enemies to lovers is overused as well, loathing to love. Where they go from, I absolutely hate your guts, I will never love you because you are the worst person on this planet, to, oh my gosh, how could I have never loved you before?
Yeah, so that's why I didn't
So-
put Marcelo and Vito together, because I thought I'm like, that would make sense. But I don't have Vito like take a fancy tour. Like that could work.
There you go. So like part of the enemies to lovers trope that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Why? Because when it works, they generally have a common goal that ends up bringing them together on accident. So for instance, they both want their soccer team to win, but they hate each other, but they have to work together to have their soccer team win. You know, something like that. And so they have to work together even though they hate each other. And that working together makes them realize, oh, you're not actually as bad as I thought.
Loki.
Yeah, and like in Loki, where it's like, I absolutely hate your guts, and then it's like, but I have to work together with you, otherwise the whole universe is going to explode. And so, therefore, you start to be like, oh, I guess we have a lot more in common than we thought. Yeah, absolutely. Marvel does a fantastic job with like 90% of things. So with loathing to love, you need to make sure that it's not true loathing as well. It's just like a dislike that's very intense.
I don't like.
Or you can have opposites absolutely do attract. This is something that they talk about in real life, right? Opposites attract. And that is because oftentimes you balance each other out, right? And so you gotta make sure that you balance each other out, and that's okay. But with balancing each other out, you need to make sure that they're not too different. Because sometimes you have someone who's like, I am literally Hitler, kill everyone. And then you have the person who's like, I hate you, I am the hero, and I will save everyone. And then they're like, now we're in love. And it's like, wait, mass murderer and hero fell in love? Pardon? What?
So this is gonna sound jerky, but who in their right mind will fall in love with Hitler? I mean,
No, it's fair. It's fair. You don't generally fall in love with mass murderers. But then, here's the interesting thing. You could make that work if the person, the hero, has had, for instance, I don't know, a very traumatized childhood. And she's like, I'm really not sure if, like some villains should just die. But then she's like, maybe not everyone though. And so she like goes to him and like explains, hey, so maybe we don't kill everyone, but we kill like these people who have been like mass murderers and killers and stuff. Like everyone who's in jail dies, but like everyone who's actually a good person, maybe not. If she can like try to persuade him, I could see that we
die. People like me, yeah, they're alright.
And it's like, that's still psycho, but at least it would make a little more sense because of traumatic background and being like, hey, I know that some people can be terrible people because I was traumatized because of like getting kidnapped or something, it makes sense. But if she was just like, I had the perfect childhood and the perfect life, and now all of a sudden I'm in love with a psycho killer.
What? Sounds like something out of a fairy tale.
yeah, the sad thing is this can happen in real life, but that doesn't mean you should write it because readers will be upset about it, even if it's a realistic thing that happens like 1 in 200 people. Like, yes, some people fall in love with psychos and they shouldn't, and toxic relationships and they shouldn't. But
oh, look, he has mud chops. I want to marry him.
Exactly. Like, oh man, he really loves cooking. Oh, I weak spot. Like, there are some people like that, and I mean, there even are people who are called like jail bunnies and things like that, where they fall in love with mass murderers and they visit them while they're in jail. Messed up, but it's a thing.
There are more fish in the sea.
There are more fish in the sea, but hey, it's their thing. So it can happen, but that doesn't. I will say, all these tropes come with a stipulation. It can happen, but does a reader want to read that? That's the issue.
It's a mass murderer. He killed my dog. Let's marry him.
He killed my dog. Now I want to marry him. Unless that dog like hated you your whole life and would not stop biting you, maybe then. Maybe you'd be like, okay, like you rescued me from this horribly abusive dog, I guess. But like,
but still, like, I'm sorry, no.
Enemies to lovers, though, like I said, if you give them a common goal and their eneminess, their loathing for each other is more based in a superficial thing. So, for example, you're a jock and I'm a goth, and so therefore we don't mix. I automatically hate you, and then later they're, hanging out and they're like, I actually kind of like you. You're actually a great person. I just hated you because of a stereotype. That's also a great enemies to lovers thing because it's breaking down those ideals of stereotypes, which is very important. All right, let's see. How am I doing on time? Ooh, not terrible, but not great. All right, the next one that I'm going to be talking about is mercy gone too far.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, snap.
So, this trope can be utilized very well, but it depends on the trope. For example, Avatar The Last Airbender did this one actually perfectly, to the point where I'm like, perfect. This is flawless. Quick spoiler alert, like skip the next 10 seconds. Basically, Zuko is the worst to his uncle, for those of you who don't know. And Uncle Iroh, right, he forgives him anyway. And he gives him a big, huge hug. And you die inside. And you're like, ah! And you're so happy, right? So,
I watched that episode like 5 times.
It was so
and
good.
I just like stare at the screen and I'm like,
right. But the reason it was so good is because you knew that Uncle Iroh already loved him and had always loved him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
he's just a good guy.
He's just
like,
a good person.
My guy, how did you get that good?
Yes, just a wholesome human being. But where it becomes a problem is if they automatically forgive them for something, A, completely unforgivable.
Yeah, like, oh yeah,
Or,
you killed my wife,
yeah,
my mother, my
literally
dog,
everyone is dead and it's your
son,
fault, but I
and
still
sure,
love
I'll
you.
forgive you.
It's like, you killed my kid and my mom.
Oh,
But it's alright, I forgive you because no. Even if you're the nicest person on the planet, it's just no, I'm sorry. I need to get you in jerk training.
And it's like, to be fair though, with this kind of thing, it can happen. But the main reason it can happen is because either A, the person is naive, and so they just completely let go and are like, of course I forgive you, or for some reason their moral beliefs make them feel that way. So as a result, they're like, of course I forgive you because morally I think it's the right thing to do. But that's something you need to establish beforehand. However, I will say be careful with that because if you just have them forgive everything, it kind of gets old. You can't
Just
forgive
like-
everything no matter how good you are.
There was this one Facebook post where the husband was going with his wife, and they're like, if you found if I cheated on you, would you stay with me?
Mhm.
She was like, sure, I'd stay with you for your tragically very short life. And so the beginning
Oh dear.
of
Mhm.
the over half of the video
Mhm.
was like, she's really gonna stay with them? Like, not sure that's the greatest idea.
Mhm.
And then she's like, for your tragically very short life. And we're like, oh snap.
For your
like,
tragically very
okay.
short, miserable.
All right. So
Yeah.
And
It's
with
like,
that,
suddenly, without a trace, and he's like, I won't cheat on you.
so there you go. And there are just certain lines you don't cross, right? And on top of that, you got to make sure that when they forgive them, there's a good reason. You know? For example, if, like we were talking about before, they were doing this enemies to lovers thing, and, you know, they're kind of in this toxic relationship, but they're like, hey, I'm going to try and do better, and they actually are trying to do better. You know, they're going to therapy, they're trying to get better, they're improving. That would be good. That would be like, yes, they're going to therapy, they're actually changing. Good. Absolutely forgive them for their trespasses in the past, if they are actually trying to change. But if they're just like, please forgive me, I promise I won't do anything like that ever again, here's some flowers.
Just like, I promise I won't steal again, here's some flowers that I stole from my neighbor's garden.
Exactly. Or like, for example, with the cheating on example with the Facebook post, if they had said like, oh yeah, if you cheated on me, I'd forgive you if you just gave me some flowers or chocolates.
No. Your husband cheats on you.
That is a line that you do not cross, you know? There are certain lines that you just don't cross. And no matter what you do, you can't have them forgive them, and you got to make sure that they hold their ground, that they are like, hey, you know what? I don't forgive you. You don't get my forgiveness just yet. The reason why I worked with Uncle Iro is because of the fact that he already loved him. He has always loved him.
And he can see the good.
And he can see the good in him, and he was like a father figure to him. Whereas if it had been like he just met this guy and was just so horrible to him this whole time, and he was just some random soldier or something, I wouldn't expect him to forgive him. In fact, if he did, I'd actually be kind of upset and confused.
Like,
It's about the relationship that you build, and you got to make sure that that relationship equates to mercy that is well earned and rewarded and that makes sense. Or if they give you mercy, like for example, they do something horrible, like they steal from a bank or something because they just can't make money, and they're, you know, something's going on with their life, and they just, you know,
gotta settle
falling apart, settling a couple debts, you know, they're in trouble, but they want to do the right thing, and so they're like, I'll just steal just this once, then they get caught. You got to make sure that they make up for it. They say, you know what, even if you hate me, every day that I'm in jail, I'm going to write to you and tell you that I love you. Or, you know, every day that I'm in jail, I'm going to write to you and tell you that I love you. And when I get out of jail, I promise I will fix up my life. I will make sure that things get better. Kind of like Ant-Man. He absolutely, part of the reason he has such a great father story is because of the fact that you know he's trying so hard to make up for that past that put him in jail. And you know he's trying so hard to earn that forgiveness and that love from his family. So, let's move on to the next thing before I run out of time. All right. Oh boy. So we already talked about cliches at the beginning, but it's good to go over describing things in your own unique ways. So cliches technically aren't the same thing as tropes. As I mentioned at the beginning, they're technically sentence-based things. So furrowed their brows, eyes welled with tears, sentences like that. Metaphors and similes that are used so often as to be like constant. Or roared like a lion. Why not roared like a bear? Why not roared like a tiger? Why not roared like a snail and make it comedic?
You know? Roared like the fluffiest bunny on earth.
Exactly, make it comedic. Roared like the fluffiest bunny. That sounds awesome. I want to read that and figure out why you said that. You know, like, it makes sense. So with cliches, I would say typically just don't worry about them at first. If you want to say furrowed his brows, eyes welled with tears, roared like a lion, absolutely, go for it. But when you're in the editing process, consider possibly changing it. You don't have to, but it would make your voice more unique if you just consider possibly changing it. Cliches can be well utilized, but again, put your own unique spin on it. Maybe instead of furrowed his brow, you can say like his brow burrowed together like two moles meeting. Like, that is a weird one, but it makes sense, you know. Or instead of eyes welled with tears, it's like eyes dripped with tears. Or eyes exploded with tears. Wow, that's quite the tantrum.
Yeah.
You
Or
know?
the ones I like to use, like tears battled to the surface but never
Ooh.
to their fall.
See, there you go. You can make these cliches your own. Because the thing is, you gotta use these types of descriptions, right? You can't just say, and they cried. That's telling. And as we mentioned before, showing, not telling, is the best thing you can do. Or tactful telling. But the reason I generally don't step into tactful telling territory is because it is so much harder to learn. It takes lots of time to learn. Whereas with showing, it's far easier to transition from telling to showing. Whereas tactful telling, there's this fine line that you're constantly walking, and if you step just wrong, you're going to completely fall off the tripwire. All right, moving right along. Now we have the non-narcissistic narcissist, also known as the mirror scene. Now, some of you may know about this, some of you may not. If you read a lot of Wattpad fan fiction, you probably know what this is. The mirror scene, and the reason it's a trope, is because a lot of people realize I have to describe my character, right? Good, important, yes. If you don't describe your character until page 27, and this whole time I've been imagining them as a red-haired woman, and secretly they're a blonde dude, problems. I'm gonna be like, still reeling, I'm confused, I don't know who I am anymore. So, you gotta make sure that you explain it.
He doesn't say that she's blonde until like book 2.
Yep.
Are you talking about speed horror?
Yeah. The entire time I thought
Wait, she's
she
blonde?
was.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought
This
she was
is a
brunette.
problem.
I was like, she's blonde freaking heck.
You know, I'm like,
Even professionals can have this happen, which is why it's important, which is why a lot of people thought, oh, let's solve this up front and have the mirror scene. Now, the reason it's a trope is because it's actually cliche. Like I said, it's the non-narcissist being a narcissist, where they're like, I really don't like the way I look, but for some reason, I stare in the mirror for 27 minutes describing how blue my eyes are. And it's like, pardon? You're not a narcissist. You hate how you look, and yet for some reason you can't stop describing your long, flowing, luscious hair and, oh, that freckle that I just can't stand. And it's like,
Freckle that you just can't stand. I'm sorry, you okay?
oh,
it's like, all right,
You good?
yay.
I'm gonna punch you.
Or then even better, where they, or even worse, but even better, where they say, hey, I'm going to stare in the mirror and be like, guess what? I have brown hair, I have blue eyes, I have white skin. And it's like,
No, but okay, with blue eyes, you can go like, the sky was as blue as my eyes.
yes,
That works.
exactly. Or you can do things like, I twirled with my blonde hair in my fingers nervously. You know, like that's a natural thing. But like
I'm
just
okay
staring
with
at
that.
yourself in the mirror
I
and being like,
respect
today I have red hair because yesterday I dyed it red. It's like, okay, calm down.
Newly red hair.
Exactly. Or even just say, or even just say like, it gave me excitement as I played with the ends of my red hair. You know, like that
There
indicates
we go.
newness. Like this is again where the showing not telling comes into play. And it's fine. I've actually seen, I hate to even say this, but I have seen the mirror scene done well. But the problem is, doing the mirror scene well is so hard, I would generally say just avoid it. But if you can find a way to make it unique, like they are a vampire, so they don't see themselves in the mirror, and so as a result they're saying like, if I could look in a mirror, I think I would see. Or something like that. You know, like that would actually be really cool. I would love to see someone do that with a vampire. But the problem is that it's a lot harder to spin that trope. But not saying you can't. If you, by all means, if you want to take any of these tropes and challenge me and be like, guess what? I'm going to write the best dang mirror scene ever. You wait. Feel free. Go ahead. All right, moving right along to a very similar one. Today is going to be a good day. The waking up scene.
oh no, yeah, I have a bad day.
You're all good.
I'm something like this.
But yes, so the waking up scene. The reason this is a problem is because it's actually really boring to start every single chapter, and especially your first chapter with, and I woke up and did X, Y, Z. I showered, I brushed my teeth, I brushed my hair, and everyone generally does this at some point in their writing. It's unavoidable. I did it. You probably have done it. You've probably done it. You've probably done it.
With my short stories.
Yes, short stories especially. I don't know why, it's a very much a thing. I have done it probably 1,000 times in my writing, and I didn't even realize it was a thing until I went to Teen Author Boot Camp, and they were like, by the way, this is a thing. And I was like, oh shoot, I'm doing that. So I'm not saying this to call anyone out. Like, if you have a wake up scene, you can do it right too. Like, I read a wake up scene once where the whole point was that they were waking up in an unfamiliar place. And they were like, holy crap, I think I've been kidnapped because I don't know where I am. That's a great wake up scene, you know? You're like, oh my gosh, we have action and mystery and intrigue right off the bat, you know? But if you have just a wake up scene where it's like, I go and sluggishly go to the shower, and then I go and sluggishly eat my Fruit Loops. We're like, okay, why do we want to keep reading?
Explain to me why this stuff.
Why do we care?
It's like, how did this get published?
Yeah, so the problem with the wake up scene is the fact that you gotta make it so we care. Are they on the run and so they wake up with a crick in their back because they slept on a rock? You know, like, make it interesting. If you're gonna have a wake up scene, make sure, like I said, you have a twist on it so it's not just, I woke up on an average day. You know?
One decent waking up scene, I think, was in my December short story.
Yes.
Because I was like, I freaking hate the morning. It reminds me of like all the people I've killed.
Exactly.
It sucks.
You made it unique. You took that wake up scene and, like I said, you made it so it was unique. You made it so you're like, I hate waking up in the morning, and we're like, why is that? And it's like, because I killed people, and it's like, oh, okay. So as a result, you can make it unique. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering who won the March.
For the March one,
February
for the February one, unfortunately, I'm not quite finished yet. I have one more judge who is still grading 2 of the short stories, so I need to make sure I get their feedback first. So I'm really close. I have almost all of them, but
I'm not done finishing this one because I don't know where to end, like with the marking. It's mine, by the way.
No, not really. It's more just. Sorry.
How many people did this one?
You 3 actually. So yeah. 3 people. So you're all in this room. Please don't go Hunger Games on me. But anyway, all right. So with that, in general, the waking up scene is a little rough. I will say though, with the short stories, it's absolutely great. It was just a little. I'd given them to them a little bit late in the day, and I was like, hopefully they can finish, but maybe not. And the library was particularly busy that day, so I think they just did not have the time that they thought they were going to be able to. But they should be able to get it finished by the end of the week. So, by the end of the week, hopefully.
So my Gmail is working.
Let's hope
That's
you
good.
check your email.
This is fair.
Okay,
Email's
I
rough.
checked
All right.
Today, but it wasn't working. Like, I got like 3
Okay.
messages and they were all finished today.
Yeah. Okay, Michael, the unread messages.
Wait, you guys are in the district, are you?
No, we're we go to a school in Alpine called Mountainville. It's a charter school.
All right. So,
Yeah, but not for
the
long.
next trope that
God,
is
not
problematic is
Is
the perfect family.
Yeah.
Every family is dysfunctional. There is no such thing as the perfect family. Like, you might think your family's absolutely fantastic. I agree. You know, like, there are times when I'm like, you know what? My family is amazing. But all families have problems. All families have struggles. Siblings fight sometimes. Parents fight sometimes. There is miscommunication sometimes where mom is like, hey, by the way, husband, I'm leaving and I'm going to be picking up the kids from here. Don't forget to pick up so-and-so from the after-school program. And then so-and-so gets left at the after-school program because they didn't hear them. You know, things like that. And it's rough. Or even so-and-so is a fantastic mom, but sometimes she has a fiery temper or something like that. Or like or like in Encanto, where she's like, I love all of you, but I'm so worried about losing this like gift that I'm not actually caring about my family members. I'm only caring about this gift, right?
Yeah.
It's dysfunctional. And there are things that are going to be dysfunctional in every single family. Every single family. There is no such thing as a perfect family. You might have a great family. You might love your family. You might have a fantastic, wonderful life most of the time. But there are still going to be some bad days, right?
Like my family, I have the best older siblings in the world. No one can convince me otherwise. but this guy.
Sometimes you just fight with your siblings a lot. It's rough, it's hard sometimes. And sometimes you can even fight with your siblings and then be best friends later. I know one of my friends said that she and her sister would fight all the time, and now they're like the closest out of all their siblings. Things like that can happen.
Yeah, there's like.
But you gotta make sure it's realistic. You gotta make sure your families aren't perfect, because there's no such thing.
Yeah,
Perfect
with that,
family. We all have flaws.
best friends that we used to fight thing, like, us two usually fight the most, right? But, like, whenever I want to share something that's funny, I call him over.
Yeah, no,
Because I'm too shy to call my older siblings over. And my younger siblings aren't going to get him. They aren't going to get it.
Oh, that's fair. That makes sense.
Like, on some days we're like enemies, and then the next day we're like so
We get along,
and
sometimes you even just fight. Like, I know with my adorable little in-laws' children, my technically brothers-in-law, but they're so small that like it's hard saying that. They're like 5 and 8, and sometimes they're like play fighting, and they're like, woohoo, we're having fun, and then all of a sudden one person smacks the other person a little too hard, and it's like, oh no, we hate each other now.
I'm from America, be like.
It's not because they don't love each other. It's just because they were playing a little too rough, and now they're upset. Like,
so
it happens.
This is like an actual fight that my youngest siblings had.
gosh.
So.
I will say, we are doing this on YouTube, so.
So they're like playing with toys, and then my little brother, he goes like a little too rough because he's a boisterous dude, right?
It makes sense.
And then she's like, I hate you. And so she'll like go and cry in the couch or whatever.
Yep.
And then she'll
That sounds
like
pretty
come
typical.
back and she's like, can we be friends? And he's like, yeah. And then they start playing with toys again.
Exactly.
It's
Absolutely.
the funniest thing.
I've absolutely seen my husband's brothers do that. Like, they're adorable, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense what they do. Because as small children, that makes sense to you,
Yeah.
Like, you have rough times, but then you're like, can we be friends, please? It's a thing.
Okay.
And that's perfectly okay.
Can we be friends? Because I want to play with you. That's what he.
That's fair
he's
too.
like,
That's fair
he's
too.
nice to me when he gets something out of it. Not all the time, but it has happened.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. The next point that I'm going to mention is too relatable.
Oh.
Where you're trying so hard to make them relatable that it's like they have every problem in the universe just so one of their readers can relate.
No.
And it's like, no. Okay, some people do. Some people do. Genuinely, their life sucks. Sure. But it has to make sense. You can't have it be like, okay, they have all of the worst acne, and all of their siblings are totally fine and don't have any acne, but then on top of that, they also have loads of anxiety, and on top of that, they have PTSD, and on top of that, they also, are adopted, and on top of that, they have all of these problems, and then on top of that, I'm bullied, like, there's just so much problems. And true, sometimes there are people like that, and I am sorry if you feel like that is you, because I know that is really, really, really rough.
You feel like that's you? Meet me at the library for Writers Club, and I will help.
Because, I know we need friends in this world, and sometimes it's rough, man.
Yeah, I have been described as the most aggressively supportive friend ever.
I can see that.
Because one of my friends will say I'm such an idiot. I'm like, no, take it back. I refuse to believe it.
Good.
And they're like, you're aggressively supportive. Thanks. I'm like, yes, I am.
See, there you go. You can find people who love you. So please know you are loved by the Writers Club. But with them being too relatable, you got to make sure that they also have some strengths. It can't be all weaknesses. Just like the Mary Sue and Marty Stew happen, where it's all strength and no weakness, you can also have too many weaknesses and not enough strengths.
Yeah, just you have every single bad thing, and then just oh yeah, also I have really strong hands.
Yeah, exactly. Or even just, I'm a really great chess player, but otherwise I'm living in poverty, I am struggling with depression, all these things. you can have that be the thing, but then say like, hey, I'm a really great chess player and I have won tournaments, and if I win this tournament, I can get more money for my family. Now that's a cool story, right?
Yeah,
it makes it more compelling, right? It makes it compelling. I was gonna say that's kind of what I was thinking of. It's actually a Disney movie. I believe it's Disney, but yeah. Yeah, where it's based off a true story. But yeah, she's fantastic. I will say it's a little bit dark, so you might want to. I want to learn a little bit. But yeah, it's not that bad. I was just saying there is some stuff that some people might not be okay with. It depends on your parents. So, but anyway, but yeah, I gotta say that's fantastic. It's great, and so with those kinds of things.
Michael, Mom doesn't hate you. You are 9, not 18.
So let's see. So I'm almost finished. So, all right. The last thing that I'm going to say is that tropes are going to be inevitable, because even if you avoid every trope that we just listed and never even like try to make the tropes unique and just avoid them altogether, you will make your own tropes. This is what I call the ultimate level of writer. You have made your own cliches and tropes because you've been writing too long. And so as a result, it's like, oh no, my characters always have this one fatal flaw all the time. Or, hey, they always do this particular thing where they push up their glasses just so, and every character with glasses does it. Or things like that.
Yeah. I've noticed that, like, when I need a side character, and he's a guy, first name that pops into my head is Travis.
There you go.
Just Travis.
With my dungeons.
Like, shut up with the Travis already. And then, like, all of my characters are spies.
With my Dungeons and Dragons group, you see the spy trope, absolutely. With the Dungeons and Dragons group that I have with my cousins, actually, we have a trope as well, where any character that we don't actually know what their name is, and the DM can't come with it up on the spot. Can you open that for him? We just name him either Chad or David. That is our trope. We even had one guy where we were like, we don't know the name for this guard, and so just asked me, so we were like, David of House David. And so that is one of the tropes that we did. And it's a trope that we've invented, because in our Dungeons and Dragons group, sometimes we'll be like, and what is your name, good sir? And the DM's like, I don't know, David.
Chad David of House.
Exactly, Chad. Chad. Generally we do, if they're a more attractive one, it's Chad. If they're less attractive, it's David. So it's just, which is nothing against Chad or David. It's just the trope that we've come up with, because sometimes when you're on the spot, you're like, I don't know what to name them. So you make your own tropes. You make your own problems as you write. And that is going to be perfectly okay. Do you guys have any particular questions before we finish up and start writing/editing about tropes or cliches and working on them? No?
But like all of my characters are like, I'm just a menace to society. Like, why do I exist?
Okay.
Most of my characters,
I might have a problem.
they have a name
Possibly.
S-I or A.
All right. I mean, to be fair, that is the thing.
You know, in the current book I'm trying to write on page 2 there are 3 characters so far. There's Shard. I don't know how to pronounce this one name.
Well, that's a problem. You can't pronounce your own character name.
Okay,
All right. I'm going to pause the recording just because that way we can keep talking. But thank you guys so much for listening to today's Writers Club video. If you have any questions, please contact me in the email below. Thank you.